And if you think today's cold, let me tell you today in Invercargill it's 5 degrees with a 5-degree wind chill. We ain't seen nothing. Okay. So do you want me to be up front? Or?
No, whatever you like.
Okay. So I stayed with the Guidens. You've probably heard of Robin Guiden. They've been down in Riverton for about 30 years and have converted their small property into a food forest, and Robin is running a pretty amazing project called Open Orchard Project in Southland. So I went down to visit them and see what they do. This is actually their backyard. They have their cuttings just jammed straight into the soil, no water. Let me point out something about Southland. It rains every month of the year pretty well equally, which is why they grow great cows. 6 weeks with no rain is an official drought. Okay, so I was quite stunned to see when all the cuttings is lined out in his backyard. He said, "Oh no, we don't do anything. If they grow, they grow." He's kind of a man after my own heart. Okay, so just to let you know where I was. Okay, that's Riverton. It's about 40 k's away from Invercargill. I actually got quite an interesting. I went to fly down and we got fogged out of Christchurch, so I bounced down to Dunedin and bussed 3 hours so down to Invercargill. And I can tell you that there was nothing but empty paddocks of mud, 1 or 2 trees, 1 or 2 hedgerows, Pinus radiata plantations on the hills. There was nothing. Cows and sheep standing up to their hocks in mud from Dunedin to Riverton. I saw 1 paddock with grass longer than my ankle. It was quite devastating. And I found out that I was talking to someone and said, "Why don't you put some mulch around your trees?" And they say, no, there's no mulch in Southland. I said, "What do you mean?" In Auckland, you just wave down an arborist and say, "I'll take your 5 cubic metres," and they say, "How many trucks do you want?" There's so few trees in Southland that when they mulch trees, all the farmers buy it for standing pads for their stock over winter. It's a expensive commodity to have. I suddenly realised they are nothing like us. Okay, so just to let you know the size, Invercargill is about 45,000 people, Riverton is about 1,500 people. All of Southland is about 80,000 people. Just to give you a little heads up about Auckland, Auckland has about over 50,000 people per ward. We have 21 wards or board areas in Auckland. Okay. Now from here to Auckland Central, there's more people in a straight line than there is in all of Southland. That's why they're all up here. Yeah, that's another part of the conversation is about these little dots on the map. Most of them are in fact little dots on the map. They're not actually towns or villages or hamlets. They are in fact now just dots on the map.
They used to be.
They used to be towns, yeah. Yeah. They've all moved.
They've still buy dollar houses in Ojai again?
Ojai, no.
They're up to $5 now.
$30,000 in Tuatapere. Topped out at Riverton at about 120,000.
Yeah, on
the beach. That was a beachfront house was 120,000 at Riverton. So yeah, if you want to buy a house, go for it. They are lying around nice and empty down there. Okay, so and also this is the south coast. I thought it was a bit of a joke, but you realise when you look past the side of Stewart Island, it's nothing but Antarctica below you. Okay, so it is indeed the south coast. Right, Guyton's property. Now, this is okay, we're looking north-south. The estuary Riverton is, funnily enough, is named after 2 rivers that come and go out to sea, Riverton. And on your right is the estuary behind these houses. North, east, west, and we're looking from the south. So this is Thames Street, the last street out on Highway 99. If you're heading out in the middle of nowhere, you wave as you go past. So they bought the property, was this one here, and it was a pretty rough place. 5 large truckloads of ex-house had to be carted away. And then while Robert started off not as a food forest dude, but as a normal guy, and his wife said, "I want some fruit trees." And I soon learned that Robin, the lovely lady of the house, had always had a plan in life, and Robert is just the guy who carries them out. So he said, the first thing I should do is cut down all the really tall broom and gorse on this property because it looks really terrible, and I'm a guy. So he cut them all down, planted his fruit trees, or his wife's fruit trees, and then the wind topped them. And every time they poked their nose above the long grass, the wind cut them to the ground again. And so the food forest concept for them was in fact to deal with the mistake he made the first time. If he had to go back in time, he would have left the gorse and the broom in place merely cut paths in and planted as fruit trees in the gaps, because as they found out, the wind in Riverton is something to behold. Okay, so if you come in on Highway 99, you swing up Thames Street, this is the back entrance. There's a little shed there with a lovely loft, literally a loft with a ladder where the woofers live. This is their house, veggie garden. They've bought this next section behind them because their family's grown up, and that's a 7-metre diameter yurt where the son and partner lives. And Robin, I said, is a lady with a plan. This may look something like a rectangle. That is actually a plastic house that she bought in Christchurch. And let me tell you, Christchurch is a long way from Riverton. And Robert was slightly worried about how a plastic house in Christchurch was going to get to Riverton, but Robin said, don't worry, we'll figure something out. And she made a phone call, and the guy said, yeah, you can buy him a truck. She's that kind of woman. Right, and if you're going to the Permaculture Hui next year, which is the week after the TreeCrops conference, this is an exceptionally large yurt from the part of the world where they build big yurts. That's where the Permaculture Hui is going to be held. Best of luck finding accommodation within about 50 kilometres of Riverton, because it's all going to be full of permaculture dudes. Right, so that's their property. This is right in here is a little spring. They planted the roadside up in natives, and now it's a self-sustaining native forest. It's regrowing back, and the spring's sprung forth, and it's now permanently flowing, and they have 7 banded cockapoo in it, which is quite cool. Something the size of your bath has 7 fish swimming around in it. The other point of reference is these are the last of the big macrocarpa. There was a huge macrocarpa hedge. It was actually a functional story of half of Southland. In the 1800s, macrocarpa was a thing, and every farm had a macrocarpa hedge around the house. And then they all gave up on doing that, and suddenly you have macrocarpa trees. And if you want to find out where the old houses are in Southland, you look across the horizon, and Southland's pretty bloody flat, actually, and you look for the big spots where the big macrocarpas are, and that's where the old abandoned Victorian farmhouse is. There's another part of that story to come as well. Okay, so what happened is these trees here they're right across here, huge, and this lower part of their property, they're only just starting to develop as though that hedge is being cut down. I should say tall trees, no longer a hedge. So this property, even though they've been there over 20 years, 25 years, is still under development. It's ongoing. Right, this is looking up the slope to the house. The first thing you notice about a food forest is it doesn't look like an orchard. Okay, we're there last week of August. It is just starting to spring forth, as it were. In the distance, we have a plum tree, we have a peach tree, that's a fejar. And the other 2 green things, this is cow parsley and daffodils. The cow parsley is just everywhere, and for the Guytons it became their go-to plant to start things off. It just comes up and they just stomp their way through it. The joys of a food forest is it packs trees in really tight. We have our trees in straight lines with big gaps, mainly so we can fit a tractor up the middle. In a food forest, you really only got to fit a human in a wheelbarrow, so you can pack trees in much tighter. If you offset them like a bee honeycomb, you can fit a lot more trees per hectare than you can if you have them in straight rows. And this is basically what they're doing. And also what you're not seeing plum, 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 because part of the plan is you don't have the same species one after another. That cuts down the ability for disease and insect attack to hop tree to tree to tree. So you go plum, apple, pear, plum, peach, all the way along. So that way it breaks up any disease spread in the system. Okay, they have what you would call a diverse understory. Like I said, cow parsley comes up right now, and Robert just said, just goes through and stomps it down. His biggest worry nowadays is, in fact, he has such a diverse understory, he doesn't remember where things are. So now he's going through with sticks during the summer and banging sticks in the ground where things are. So in this time of year when you can't see them, he doesn't plant something else on top of them. And this is the part of the world where the rhubarb does drop down to the ground. Auckland, the rhubarb doesn't. So we looked at each other weirdly. I thought he was strange and he thought I was strange too. So that is definitely cooler. It was a brisk day, it was about 8 degrees.
Does he use the cow parsley for eating?
Not really. If they did, you would never notice it because you're looking at like half a hectare of cow parsley.
Yeah, but okay. I just wondered if they used it because apparently it is...
Wild chervil is another name for it. So yes, you could, but like I said, it's just their first green crop coming up in autumn, and it just smothers everything to about knee high. And Robert just goes through and stomps out the pathways again. That's harakeke, native flax. They use it for the ropes. And Pruning is pretty relaxed. There was the odd branch cut out because I kept smacking him in the head as he went past with the wheelbarrow. So him and I agreed on that rule, that if it really does poke in the eye enough times, it's obviously the wrong place for that branch. Okay. The house is interesting. It looks old. It's actually a modern house. It's designed from Ernest Rutherford's country house that he grew up in. Very efficient use of space, 3 bedrooms upstairs into the eaves and a big space downstairs. That's tough down there. They leave the bathroom window open all night. It was like 4 degrees. The two feather duvets were really nice, I can tell you. but a very glorious place to be, especially sitting on the front deck in the morning watching the sun come up. Right, citrus house. Robert has a huge amount of entertainment on his property. He enjoys himself. He builds follies, a grotto for the grandkids to play in. There's huts, and he's building a hobbit hole. And I said, "Oh, is that another folly?" And he kind of shuffled his toes a bit and said, "No." Okay, I hear some stress in his voice. Actually, it's a great shot of the greenery. And he said, "What is it then?" He said, "Oh, it's my citrus house." I looked in there and I said, "Oh, that doesn't look like a citrus." He says, no, the citrus is doing so well I moved the citrus house and the citrus died. So that's now covering something else that shouldn't be growing in Riverton that he has a protection around. So I think he may be building a second citrus house to put another citrus back in.
So what's he got in there?
I have no idea. He said what it was, but he was rattling off
laughing.
names, so many names, and my brain was dribbling after a little while. So what we are actually against is the northern tree line, and he's planted up really heavily. Unfortunately, when you buy your property and you're back onto stock, the first thing you should really do is to make sure that your 8-wire, barbed wire, triple barbed wire electrified fence is working. Otherwise you wake up one morning to find some very happy cows chewing through your trees. So that was the first couple of years of learning that experience. Right, this is something of interest for us. This is actually a Chinese hawthorn. And those little red dots are actually hawthorn they're carrying. Hawthorn, heart repair medicine in a fruit. And I was intrigued with the Chinese hawthorn because they're very large, as opposed to the European hawthorn, which are really small. And these ones, Robert's grandson just scoffs them by the handful, so I take it they're edible.
Used a lot in Chinese soups.
Yeah, so my idea of heart medicine is not take a tablet, but to make hawthorn jelly and have it on my toast. So that's why I've been very interested in the hawthorn. So this beast, I have a little small one in a pot that's suffering at home. This one is really happy. Okay.
I got some at the Hamilton Garden TreeCrops sale. I gave one to you, Raina, didn't I?
Yeah.
The Chinese, and I've got a couple, yeah.
So that was about 2.5, 3 metres tall, that one, and that's the fruit. I didn't actually eat them, I brought them home. Like a good tree cropper, I left that orchard with my pockets full, and I brought them home and I've now potted up the seeds. Okay, so that should be one of those crops we're thinking about for growing our medicine. Right, this is Robert's favourite apple tree, Old Vostok, a Dutch favourite. In fact, most people have a hard time identifying what fruit they're eating, but he says whenever he has Dutch guests walk through the property, he's talking away and he stops because he suddenly realises that the whole party is behind him staring at this tree, drooling gently. They recognise it. It's a eater, a cooker, a storer and a cider apple. So that's pretty good. It kind of ticks all the boxes. And it's also a triploid. Now I'll get back to why the word triploid is important, but you'll notice it's a really good, robust looking tree. And that's a thing about triploids.
Does it do well in Auckland?
What's that?
Does it do well in Auckland?
I don't know if it does well in Auckland.
I have one in Israel.
It's brilliant?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Note that down, folks. Bill de Bostock, Dutch apple.
Do you see them, and we've got them in our collection?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
We assign wood for grafting.
Okay. Yep. Right. We also had a really good discussion on pollination because Robert's discovered, much to his delight, that he is absolutely lethally allergic to bee propolis. So never offer the man a propolis lozenge if he has a cough. He will die. Right. So on that cheery note, he's discussing getting rid of his bees, him not wanting to die and all that. And we're sitting there watching the plum trees, which are quite spectacular. These are European plums, not Japanese plums, which we have in Auckland, and they were just solid white, and the trees were humming. And it wasn't just wax eyes, bellbirds, tuis. The place was hopping with birds, but there was honeybees, bumblebees, native bees, hoverflies. What else did we see?
Ordinary flies.
Ordinary flies. Yeah, this place was just crawling with absolutely all kinds of life. So Robert didn't think that losing his beehives off the property would actually affect his pollination services. Because he has such a diverse and living understory and trees all the time, the place was just alive. And this was on a pretty cool day in very exceptionally late winter. Okay, it was quite stunning. So yeah, and also having bellbirds as part of your pollination suite was quite cool. It was something I'd never seen before. All right, so we're going to leave their backyard and go to the Riverton food forest. Now this is, who rolled my N? Interesting story. This was the first Riverton community garden, and it is on sand, as the Riverton township is on a peninsula as the river goes out. So part of it's sand, part of it's river silt, part of it's river clay. So depending on where you are, some's good, some's horrible. This was the some's horrible bit. It was also windswept. And the third thing that just finished them off completely for a community garden, they had cooch. We have kikuyu, they have cooch. And they just could not win. It drove them crazy, and then eventually they all walked off and gave up. So to fight back, they just planted everything they had. So what we have here is a lot of heritage fruit trees, such things as cardoons and mallow. And again, this lovely green thing here is the cow parsley. And they planted hard and they planted heavy, native trees, everything went in. And now it's starting to rock and roll because as all the trees have grown up together, it's created its own shelter. And it's really tight, really intense. You've got to weave your way amongst it all. But Robert says there's so much fruit hitting the deck, they don't know what to do with it, which is not a bad problem to have. And there's no cooch because it got shaded out. The cow parsley comes up first, it puts shade over the top of the cooch. As the cooch tries to come away, the tree's shaded out completely. So they've turned a site that was useless for gardening into something that's pretty awesome for a food forest, and that's where the food forest has come into its own. Also, we have a lot of this in Robert's place, a lot of the ribes, a lot of the currant, black currant, white currant, red currant, Worcester berry, gooseberries. So a lot of these small stuff we read about in English books and don't have a chance of growing. These things are stunning. In fact, I think that there is a flowering currant. It seemed to be the flowering plant of Riverton. I'd never seen flowering currants 2.5 metres tall in diameter. That was massive. Really, really enjoying that 8 degrees temperature. Far more than I was. I realised up in Auckland we step out into the sun, you feel the heat of the sun. Down there you step out into the sun and you've just gone from shadow to sun. That's the difference. The temperature hadn't changed a bit. We feel the heat of the sun here. So that was quite amazing. So this is the Riverton food forest. Right, the next part was Robin's plan. Now she has 2 plans shown here. The Open Orchard project was, she realised pretty early on that a lot of the farmsteads, Riverton is probably the oldest town in New Zealand, by the way. The whalers stayed, essentially. What happened, the whalers and sealers, early 1800s, around what's now Fiordland, one of them stayed, and Riverton is their staging point. So, much to my surprise, I found out that some of the earliest fruit trees in New Zealand are here. And what was happening is the farmsteads were abandoned as they built a new one, and they just walked off their old farmhouse and left the orchard behind. And 120, 140 years later, the trees are dying too. They've pretty well lost all of the stone fruits, so all the plums and peaches and apricots have all gone out of the farmsteads. And in the past 15 years, about 20-30% of all the apple trees have gone while they're trying to save them. So what Robin did is she went out and published a story saying she wanted to know where all these farms were, because often you had no idea. And she started getting said, oh, down this road on the right you'll see it. And so Robin, with Robert in tow, started visiting these farms, taking signwood off them and grafting them up. And then she did something else that was pretty cool. She said, I will give you back your trees if you promise to look after them, to the farmers who are on the property. And then she went to the local communities and said, if you give me some land, I will start planting them on that farm, on that piece of land, in the townships, village spots on maps. So that's the Open Orchard project, and she also started moving them around schools as well. So what this loop is is like we're saying, most of these towns have died standing up. The baker, the butcher, the draper, all those shops are boarded up, quite literally, and all these towns I went through, they're all shut. Because I'd rather drive an hour, hour and a half into Invercargill nowadays. And that's the other thing about driving around Southland, there ain't no one else on the road. It was quite eerie. So this loop is part of a two-stage thing. The Open Orchard project is put a bit of pride back into the local communities to save their trees. And it's quite interesting meeting the people, and they're really proud to have their trees in a communal space. But this is a planned loop, a bus loop, electric bus loop that Robin wants to start up to start community markets in these small towns, is a second stage of building these towns back up. So people can afford to buy a 30,000 house in Tuatapere, and this way there can be a market or market coming towards them to build the town up. So Robin has a really big plan. This lady does not wake up in the morning with a dream. She wakes up with a fully fledged plan in her head, and she's willing to work a year, 5 years, a decade to make it work. She's the most impressive person to be standing around. So this kind of tells you where I went. Towns like Nightcaps, which I'd heard of but never been to. These are small little places, and these are the Open Orchard places I went. So I'll tell you where. There's Tuatapere, Clifton, there we went, up to Monowai, up was word, that's Ohowai, Nightcaps, Otau, Alex Mackenzie, and then back down to Riverton. So it's a bit of a loop we did, and the reason we were doing it in the last week of August was also the first scheduled survey. So what's happening is most of these trees, there's no idea what they were, they came off the properties, you know. One was like Mrs. Smith's last stand, where she quite literally lay in front of her husband's bulldozer, because in Southland, if it's not grass, it's not productive. So the farmers are busily grazing the bulls in the apple orchard, because bulls are worth more than apples, or literally getting the bulldozer out and bulldozing everything and putting it into grass. So one of the ladies lay down in front of the cooking apple that had fed the family for over 120 years to save it. So some tough ladies. Right, this is Clifton, and one of the problems we face here, this tree here is one of the macrocarpa that used to be a hedge. The hassle is when these trees go 20 metres up, they also go 20 metres out, and they quite literally buried a lot of the farm orchards, and you only have the central rows left, where the rows that were close to the hedge have been absolutely smothered and destroyed. All this brown stuff all the way around here, that's all creeper, so most of the orchard's been buried. And this one, Robin was told where it was, drove past it several times, unable to find it, until she came back this time of year, and she actually saw the plums. This one had a plum on it, and saw the plum in flower, and across the paddocks was able to spot it and find it. So she's taken material off this one, but it's a classic example of why these orchards are going. They've just been completely lost.
What's the creeper here?
I have no idea. We just walked, took some photographs, and I said, thank you very much. That 8 degrees standing out here in the wind is so much fun. Let us go somewhere else. Thank you.
Looks like an old man's beard.
Yeah, could be old man's beard. I mean, one of the clematis. But it's seasonal, obviously. It's not like up here where most of our problems are evergreen.
Yeah.
So they have a different set of weeds down there.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is as you can guess, this is a lovely sign. If you're thinking of doing tree crop stuff and ask the Tree Crops Association to fund you, as the guy and head of funding, I'll tell you we do not. These signs are worth more than you'll ever get out of Tree Crops. We will pay for the trees, we will not pay for these signs. Okay. Robin is also really good at filling out funding applications. She learnt a long time ago with the Southern Regional Council that if you have anything involving the word environment in it, they will not fund it. Robert's been on the Southland Environment, it's now Environment Southland as a regional council. He's been on for 10 years. I've just taken him to be okay. So, yeah, so none of her applications have the word environment in it. So that's why it's the Open Orchard project. So, but someone else funded this, and it's pretty amazing. So this is outside every single of the orchard parks. There's some pretty cool signage. And at Monowai, what we have is every farm has all their fruit laid out. So they can go back, and they actually got the families, the grandkids, the great-grandkids, the current farmers, all to come and plant these trees to show this is your heritage. And Monowai is pretty cool because Monowai was a dam building town, and when it closed, people bought them as holiday homes, and it has a permanent population of 6. And as we got out and opened the gate to the orchard, the caretaker of this orchard ran over to say hello. He spotted us a mile away. And they're so proud of this that this little line there is actually irrigation. So the local community, 6 permanent and so many holiday makers, paid for irrigation to look after this orchard. They are really, really proud to have these farms saved, as it were, for them. That's pretty cool. Now what Robin's also trying to do is to get these locals heavily involved. These are 4 or 5 years old and they're fruiting well. They're just starting to prime up. All these trees are on 106, I think, not dwarfing, because they get no love. Well, these guys get lots of love, they've actually got irrigation, but most of the others I put on a reasonably sized rootstock so they can look after themselves, and that's it. They get put in. Okay, but Robin's trying to get these people to come on seasonally, spring, summer, autumn, winter, and actually celebrate being there. As you can see, budburst wasn't really happening, but it was really just to get a handle on it, because some of these trees are unknown. Robin can identify 80 different apple varieties by sight, which probably makes her the best apple identification person in New Zealand at this point in time. It's pretty awesome, but even she can't get a lot of them. Right, so this is Ojai. Ojai is a coal mining town, and there was an abandoned, just over behind us, as it were, in this photo, was the abandoned lawn bowling club, and it looked like a perfect spot. It is fenced, it is flat, it has a clubhouse, everything you want for a kind of secure orchard. Unfortunately, it was on a split title, and the local board could not get their act together. So instead, we got the piece of land next to the bowling club car park, which is cool. This tree was interesting because it's carrying leaves all through the winter, and now the other ones are just starting to budburst. So that was the evergreen apple, which is a bit unique. And it also shows up another problem, as you notice, this nice light brown around the edges and a light brown around the trees. And behind us there was a light brown line running all the way across the paddock where someone had walked with their spray bottle. Robin has said she has relaxed her stance, and how the community runs their community open orchard is up to the community. She's given up that bit because every community is different. So obviously here one person thinks maintenance involves mowing the lawn down to the dirt and spraying around the trees. This one here is probably a triploid. Now, this is why I'm saying triploids are important. I've always been intrigued that in English catalogues they point out quite strongly this is a triploid apple. In New Zealand we're inherently lazy on many things, and one of them is not pointing out a triploid. I'm going to use both hands for this game because what a triploid is it, as it sounds, it has three sets of genetic material. We have 2. If you think our genetic code is a spiral, it's 2 together, and when they produce a seed or a sperm, an egg or a sperm, it's a single code, it unravels. Unfortunately for us, it's not quite that simple. So what happens is your double helix splits into 2, and just to make life really complicated, those 2 form up 2 again and then split to make 4. But what happens somewhere along the line is when one of them is supposed to split, it doesn't. So you end up probably with an egg with 2 sets of genetic material in it. Gets the sperm, and it's a triploid. It's a hybrid, it's sterile. So why triploids are important to us is they've got hybrid vigour. So what that one is it's probably really, really, we look down the lines, and you can see these ones with nice big fat branches, really strong growth next to other ones which are quite thin and spindly. So they're great for production, so things like the Dutch apple, and a lot of our top old heritage varieties are all triploids, but unfortunately they're sterile. They don't produce pollen, so they need others to pollinate them. So in fact probably you need 2, because one to pollinate the hybrid, then the other 2 to swap between them 2 to pollinate themselves. Okay, so really important, but it's not New Zealand catalogues, and we're really, really bad at putting that information out. We should have it because it really affects how you plant. Right, but we were interested in this because it suddenly helps us identify these trees, because somewhere along the line we can go to a catalogue and get rid of all those that aren't triploids and say, right, it's one of these 6. Gives us a bit of a fighting chance to identify them. But they became really, really obvious when we stood and looked down a line of trees. Now the other part about Ojai, which was quite entertaining to me, is that, and that, and that, and that,
Obviously Ojai.
that, and that, and that. That's lumps of coal. Ojai is a mining town. It still is a coal mining town. I love the sign that's saying, you know, watch out for blasting. It goes off on the side of the road, so you don't jump when they do their detonations. These trees had a special problem. They planted them in here, and the first year was the driest year they'd ever had. The trees suffered, and they suddenly realised it was in fact coal with a bit of dirt. So after a year, they literally dug all the trees up, widened the holes, tipped in lots of compost, mixed it all in, replanted again after a heavy-duty prune, and luckily their person in Ojai who looks after them, also the other side of the car park's a swimming pool, so she drags the community hose over and waters the tree, while someone else here is desperately trying to put herbs around it to make it like a herbal lei, winter cress or something like that, miner's cress. So there's about three different management styles in place at the same time going on here. So each of these separate sites had some really fun problems. This is Nightcaps. Now this looks like the almost perfect place. This is the Heritage Museum. It's a little miner's cottage. This is about over a quarter of an acre of empty land, museum land. Really entertaining that this is a little garden running around the building, and there's ballerina apples planted in it. Ballerina are the broom pole apples. Very, very modern. So Robin went to the local board and said, so why don't I bring along to you heritage apples from your local farms for free and arrange to plant them for free so you can have a heritage orchard in your museum. And they said, that sounds a little complicated. Let us think on that. 5 years on, they are still contemplating whether that's a thing you really want to have.
I went to buy a house at Nightcaps,
Whoa.
and I got there at the end of November, stuck in a greatcoat and it didn't come off.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the pub because it was the only place to get any accommodation. I said, I can't see any vegetable gardens around that place. When do you plant your vegetable gardens? And the chap said, when the snow goes off those mountains.
You can see.
You're going to be bloody joking. But it was true.
Yep. Nightcaps is another coal mining town called Nightcaps because of the clouds on the hillsides. And yes, you can. I was there in August and the hills were covered in snow. So yeah, it was bloody cold.
Sunset snow on them in December.
Yeah, they got snow on them now. Yeah, so like I said, there's problems abounding from areas you'd never thought of. You'd think people would come at you with open arms if you offered them free trees, but not to be yet. But Robin is persistent and she won't give up, and I can guarantee you that Nightcaps will have a heritage orchard in due course. Now Riverton is interesting. There's one street over from the Guytons, the local estuary restoration group, which they also run, bought a patch of land, and the patch of land is landlocked. It's inside the streets. It's joined by a paper road which they can't get access to. But this neighbour here, this lovely lady here, allowed an easement through her property to get to the paddock. Now I figure that's between 50 and 80,000 bucks worth of Auckland land that she willingly handed over to the Open Orchard group to allow access to the orchard. And I was just gobsmacked. I just couldn't believe that happening in Auckland. What's just happening, they've just done it, new fence, these are sticks all the way along, that's going to be espaliered fruit trees as well. Okay, and this is Robert in the orchard. Now why he's looking at those ones is some of the trees given back to the farmers didn't get loved the way they should have. They still ran their stock through them. And the word got back to the Guytons that some of these trees that they'd lovingly restored and put back out into the farms were just, new owners came in and didn't give a toss. And literally they went out there with loppers, pruned these down, dug them up and moved them. And when these guys do moving, they do it in 10-ton trucks. They just do a call and someone says, sure, I'll bring the truck around. And the community turns up, digs up these trees, throws them on the back of the truck and delivers them. It is pretty impressive. But again, these were replanted again by family members of the original families. So all this land you can see around the back here is all part of the same paddock. And Robert made a decision to leave a few open spaces so he could actually stand in the orchard. And these trees even now are producing more food than the local neighbourhood can deal with. So it's a pretty impressive amount of food coming out of it. This site's pretty interesting. Like I said, it's landlocked, but there is a paper road running to it. And Robert's dream is to have community gardens and a cycle track along the paper road to get people off Highway 99, which means otherwise you get run down, and to allow people to be able to move through Riverton, through gardens and orchards in a safe manner. Kind of like he calls it pearls on a chain, which I thought was a pretty cool descriptor. Right, getting close to the end. This is Riverton Primary. Now, a large part of their work was working with schools. 57 schools and 30 preschools in the area have their trees. And all the trees are relevant to the school or preschool, as in from the local area. There's about 5 or so apples there. And luckily, a new principal came into the school. These are actually seated just outside the principal's office. Robert planted them that way, so he figured the kids wouldn't quite vandalise them or eat them if the principal could watch them. So the new principal came along, wondered what the hell they were, and told the caretaker to dig them out. So Robert, just by an off chance, decided he'd better go and introduce himself, and popped down to the school and was literally shaking the principal's hand when the caretaker turned up with the axe and the spade to dig them out. And Robert's going, "What's he doing?" And they said, the principal said, "I'm just getting rid of these things, they're in the way." And Robert said, "You do realise that the children here planted these, and it's their great-grandparents' trees. These are the heritage trees from Riverton." And the principal said, "No, stop." So the caretaker got told to turn around and leave. So these are about 5 minutes away from being ex-trees. And there were more, but the biggest threat to these trees normally are weed eaters. Oh, sorry, men with weed eaters, let's get the terminology right.
Or ladies.
Oh, really? The confession time, is it?
Really?
No, not
Rare.
rarely.
Rarely, yes. Yes, they do have a fur. So they've lost a few down around the area, and it's usually a weed eater. One of the other ones, we visited the Alex Mackenzie Arboretum. It was interesting because all the trees had been pruned wrong. Someone had helped by pruning it all to an inward-facing bud, and Robin for 2 years in a row, and Robin was fair spitting, but trying to deal with the truss board that ran the place was proving to be difficult, and all the underside of the branches were all grazed and smashed up from the half-ton mower running around under the trees and bouncing off all the branches. So the Arboretum was a great place to put them. The location was gorgeous, but other factors, again, looking after those trees proved to be quite problematic. Again, every single place they've put trees, there's an issue somewhere along the line. And you've got to Robin just had to take a deep breath and say, having them at the Alex Mackenzie Arboretum was good. Bad pruning, they'll deal with eventually, and hopefully the trees will get big enough to survive the motor mile guy. And here, the caretaker has taken better care of them now. And actually just across the road, that is the new community garden, which is quite cool, because the kids can see it, and that's actually a honesty box. If you want to make a fortune, well, not a fortune, but eggs sell well, $5 a dozen.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that's all raised. They've all gone to raised beds now to try and get rid of that kind of sandy battle and deal with the cooch. They've come around to a new way of doing it. So I was there for the same time as they were getting ready to do their grafting days. The list they're holding is 125 different scion. It said about 80 of them, at least 80 of them that Robin knew. I went through with my lists and put some dates and times on them. Some of them are simply farm names because they haven't got them ID'd yet. And some of them are from where they've been found on the side of the road. The Dipton Redburst is a great cooker, so I'm told. So they're hoping that when they get some testing done on them, that some of those wildings are going to be quite useful trees. Okay, Malcolm's a lovely gentleman, 83. Well, I say lovely because I'm being very polite. Really staunch, hard case farmer. Hard case farmer who can graft beautifully and also runs a big restoration project for a forest, so he's my type of dude, but I wouldn't want to cross him. If he didn't like you, you found out really, really quickly. Now, another part of being down there is, what this is a single sheet folded in half and sewn pockets. These had all the sign wood stuck in it, wetted, rolled up, and put under a sack at the back of the Guyton's house, because when it's 8 degrees outside, it is rather like a refrigerator. And that's where they kept all their sign wood. I was quite surprised when we went to pick it up, and we just picked a sack up from the back of the house and off we went. I said, "Don't you keep it cold?" And she just kind of looked at me like, "What do you mean?" Yeah. Okay, that's the end of my short tour. Any questions?
Derek, I see that, you're talking about the school with the fruit trees that nearly got annihilated. They don't seem to have labels. They
No.
don't bother, or the labels disappear.
But they are GPS'd and they are mapped.
Oh.
Everywhere we went, Robin had a map in her hand. It was the joys of the open orchard projects. They were laid out in lines because they were usually associated with a farm. So that way, and a lot of them aren't named anyway because they don't know what they are. So that's what they're working on. Robin's applied for over $100,000 worth of funding to do genetic testing. The price is coming down. And because she's got these 120 odd different varieties, if we can get them ID'd, then she can start working backwards to identify all the other trees as well. And she'll probably have the best database of heritage fruit trees in New Zealand by that stage, which is pretty cool. It's not bad for about, a couple of thousand varieties that are in New Zealand.
What
Selby.
sort of-
Did you get to do Abbotsford?
Nope,
No.
This-
Is anyone else that you booked into it?
nope. I was only there for 3 days. Didn't sleep much, but I was chatting all the time. But yeah, there's only so
Sorry,
far.
what was the question, Selby? Some of
Abbotsford.
us are a bit deaf down there.
Anyone who's been to Abbotsford?